Think World War I ended in 1918? That's the polite version. The ugly truth, the peace that followed, was less of a healing and more of an unstable surgical patch. It didn't close the wound, it turned it into an infection. In the next 20 minutes, I'll show you 3 simple ingredients that cooked a catastrophe: a humiliating treaty, a shattered economy, and a helpless international system. Put them together, and you get the recipe the world followed straight to 1939. Stick with me. There are wild human stories in here, wheelbarrows full of money, failed coups that became lessons, and global institutions that looked brave on paper and powerless in practice. June 28, 1919. The Treaty of Versailles is signed. The victorious Allies wanted a lasting peace. Instead, they forced Germany to accept sole blame for the war, hand over territory, and pay reparations so large they were essentially a life sentence. Imagine being told, "It's all your fault," and pay up. That is humiliation wrapped in legal language. Picture a soldier from the front, boots caked in mud, smell of cordite still on his clothes, coming home to a country that says he lost because politicians stabbed the army in the back. That lie, the Dockstoch-Legende, the stab-in-the-back myth, spreads like gossip in a small town. In Munich beer halls and Berlin streets, people whisper it, clap for it, then believe it. That myth was political dynamite. It turned frustration into a search for villains and, crucially, for a man who could fix everything. Meanwhile, the Weimar Republic, born of defeat, tries to govern a nation that believes it was cheated. The stage is set. But here's the catch. Punishment can be fair and stabilizing if done with political foresight. Versailles did not have that foresight. It had retribution. Let's zoom in to the 1920s. Germany tries democracy, the Weimar Republic, but the economy is a furnace. Reparations payments kick off a chain. France and Belgium occupy the Ruhr in 1923 to enforce payments. The German government calls for passive resistance, no production, yet expenses continue. To pay striking workers, the government prints more money and prints more. People's savings evaporate. Wages are paid daily, sometimes hourly. The currency collapses. There are famous images, people wallpapering rooms with banknotes because it's cheaper than paper. Kids play with piles of cash. That's not a metaphor. That happened. The consequence is social chaos. Middle-class security vanishes. Veterans who survived mud and gas now fear poverty and ridicule. Into this emotional vacuum step radical groups promising dignity and revenge. November 8th, 9th, 1923, the Beer Hall Putsch, a failed coup attempt led by Adolf Hitler and others in Munich. They march, shots are fired, the coup collapses. It's a fiasco and a spectacle. Hitler is arrested and tried. But here's the twist. His trial becomes a stage. He gives fiery speeches, wins national attention, and when he's jailed, he writes Mein Kampf, turning failure into a political lesson. After the putsch, Hitler changes tactics. No more violent street takeover, for now. Build a mass movement, win elections, corrupt institutions from inside. At the same time, international money, American loans, and the Dawes Plan of 1924 pump credit into Germany, stabilizing the mark and giving a fragile breathing space. But it's borrowed breathing, dependent on foreign cash and world trade. The economy looks healthier until the world goes into a tailspin.
October 29, 1929. Black Tuesday. Wall Street crashes. The ripple becomes a tidal wave. American banks call back loans. Industry collapses. Germany, which had been propped up by foreign capital, convulses. Unemployment explodes. Despair becomes political currency. You know what's funny? People expect economic failure to lead to thoughtful reform, better safety nets, smarter governance. Instead, when the cupboard is empty, people often choose the strongest sounding promises. That's where parties like the Nazis benefited. They offered a story: humiliation erased, work returned, pride restored. Simple, terrible for democracy. By early 1930s, the Nazi vote spikes. Street violence escalates. The conservative elite, terrified of leftist revolutions, begin to think they can control extremists and use them as a tool. Spoiler, you can't. On January 30th, 1933, President Hindenburg appoints Hitler chancellor, thinking the worst is manageable. That's a huge miscalculation. In months, the Reichstag fire, the Enabling Act, and brutal repression shut down opposition. The legal path, combined with propaganda and terror, completes the takeover.
The story is not only European. Across the globe, Japan faces a resource problem. No oil, no rubber, but a military machine and ambitions. On September 18, 1931, the Mukden incident, a staged explosion, gives Japan an excuse to invade Manchuria. They take it swiftly and create a puppet state, Manchukuo. Enter the League of Nations, the grand experiment in international governance born from the ashes of WWI. The League investigates, authors the Lytton Report, and says Japan's actions are not justified. The response? A strongly worded condemnation, then nothing. No troops, no sanctions that bite. Japan simply withdraws from the League in 1933 and keeps going. It's the same pattern elsewhere. Mussolini invades Ethiopia in 1935. The League blusters, imposes half measures, and the message to ambition is clear. Act boldly, and democracies will squabble while you take the prize. Europe watches, Asia watches. Aggression without consequence becomes a contagious idea.
So let's pull it together with a single human image. A veteran returning in 1919, stripped of savings by 1923, shouting at a politician he blames for humiliation, listening to a charismatic speaker promising strength, while elsewhere, a rising empire seizes land and the League shrugs. That's not coincidence. It's an ecosystem of failure. Punitive peace, economic chaos, and a failed international order didn't just create bad actors. They made the world expect bad actors to win. When institutions can't enforce rules and citizens lose faith in moderate politics, extremists fill the vacuum. That's the core lesson of these years.
In Episode 2, we'll follow the next steps: the Spanish Civil War, the testing ground for tactics and weapons, and the last missteps that pushed Europe over the edge. You'll see how these small, brutal choices stacked into an unstoppable avalanche. If this episode changed how you see 1918 to 1939, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Drop a comment. Which moment surprised you the most? Versailles, hyperinflation, or the league's impotence? I read every comment. Thanks for watching. If you like the visual style here, tell me, and I'll bring maps and deep dives next time. See you in episode 2.